There are two lives. There's a life of this world, and there's a life in the afterlife. We believe in an afterlife, heaven and hell, day of judgment. All of our deeds will be presented before God, and people are going to be begging for God's forgiveness. And nobody's actually making it to heaven in Muslim creed unless through God's love and forgiveness. Our deeds alone aren't enough. That's unanimous Muslim creed. Nobody disagrees with this point. The Prophet was explicit in saying this. In other words, we can do all the good we want in the world, it's still not enough. It's going to have to be God's mercy and love at the end that saves us. It's always been this way. This is not a new idea I'm presenting to you. But regardless, there are two lives. One that we live here and one that we live there. What's important to note in Islamic tradition is that God expects us to beautify and build both homes. He expects us, now this is unique, you might not have heard this before. God actually expects us to build both homes. As a matter of fact, yesterday's Friday sermon that I had to do in Plano, I was explaining one singular verse of the Quran in which the terminology uses وَاسْتَعْمَرَكُمْ فِيهَا. He wanted you to build on the earth. He wanted you to build. And isti'mar is used in Arabic when you build something that lasts a long time, and while you're building it, you don't end up destroying other things. In other words, you build what you would call in the modern sense sustainable societies, eco-friendly societies, societies in which the few that are building major corporations and cities are not doing so at the expense of others that are being economically manipulated, right? So the idea of building something that anybody can benefit from, right? And so God goes out of his way in the Quran on countless occasions. It's really hard to put a count on this, to describe how beautiful the earth is, to describe how gorgeous mountains are, what a joy rivers are, what a great thing even, the desert Arabs didn't have a lot of that stuff. So he'd even talk about camels and how awesome they are. And the stars, because they really didn't have much else to look at, right? So at least the stars are pretty cool. So you talk about the stars. Even you can find beauty too. Even you can find beauty, And so you talk about these things to let us know that the life of this world, worldly existence, is not a curse. We're not damned here. We're blessed here. We're blessed here. Just stay away from these few restrictions, abide by these few regulations, and this world is beautiful. And your job is to make it beautiful and build it. And now, of course, when you build something, when you ask your child, I ask my child, hey, build me a castle. He says, buy me the Legos first. You can't build something until you have the ingredients, right? So he says, وَجَعَلَ فِيهَا أَقْوَاتَهَا in the Quran. He put in the earth all of its inherent powers. In other words, all you will need to make this world a beautiful place, for yourself and others, has been put in this earth. And human civilization has been here for quite a long time, and we've had resources enough for everybody. Now, it may not seem that way because of the varying economic situations of many countries, right? And economies, and the first world, second world, and third world, and all of that, right? But from the faith perspective, we believe actually there are enough resources for all human beings to live well on this earth and live in a healthy and a fair way. Okay, so that's our faith perspective on life in this world. You don't choose the next life for this life. You don't abandon the concern for the next life for this life either. You balance both of them. In other words, we live a spiritual existence while being involved, greatly in this world at the same time. So there's nothing materialistic for a Muslim in, for example, running a multi-million-dollar business. There's nothing wrong with that. However, there is something wrong if that's his goal. So that's the other subtle point. So you can engage in this world, but it can't be your goal. Your goal is higher. Your goal is to do something that benefits others. And your goal is, if you really want to build a home, your goal is to build your real home in heaven. And so all that you do here is only a means to get there. Okay, so do a good job and enjoy it while you're doing it here, but make sure you're building your next life. And what's the easiest way to build your next life? This is another important Islamic concept. It's the concept of what's called sadaqah jariyah, continuous charity. Now what does that mean, continuous charity? It actually means if I leave a good legacy behind, I'm only going to live so many years. I don't know how long I'm going to live. If I can do some acts of good that actually live longer than I do. For instance, I go to a desperate location where education, for example, is a desperate need, and there aren't any resources. And I help set up a school. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, I help set up a school. And the school takes off, and now children are getting a good education, and they're building a better and better society for their for the next generation. And this school takes off, and it goes on. It's now 200 years old. I left the world a long time ago, But every student who graduates from that school and does something good in life, I have a share in. I get commission out of that. That's called continuous charity. The Muslims are supposed to build their afterlife not just through good works of their own, but to invest in opportunities of continual good. And that's how we see preparing ourselves for the next life. Like my motivation to teach, for instance, I was not originally a teacher. I wasn't even a public speaker. I was a nervous wreck when I have to speak in front of people. But this last month I had to give a sermon in front of 15,000 people in Malaysia. That was pretty nerve-wracking. But I've pushed myself in this direction, and my teachers did also. And one of the most motivating instructions or teachings from our religion that pushed me in this direction was a saying of our Prophet, in which he said, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, خَيْرُكُمْ مَنْ تَعَلَّمَ الْقُرْآنَ وَعَلَّمَهُ. The best of you are the ones who learn the Qur'an and teach it. The best people are the ones who learn this book of inspiration and give this inspiration to others so they can do awesome stuff. That's what I've been doing for the last, 12, 15 years. I lost count. That's what I've been doing. I also feel in our next session, not this session, but our next session, I'm going to talk to you about how I believe the Qur'an, one of the most popular books on the planet, like it or not, most popular book on the planet, most well-read by many statisticians, and if not the top, then up there, even if you disagree with the statistics, is actually one of the most misunderstood texts in world history. One of the most misunderstood and underestimated, overlooked, by Muslims and non-Muslims. And I'm going to highlight some of that stuff to you in our next session. Like what do I mean the Qur'an gets overlooked? Or some things in it just people don't even know what's there. Right? So we'll talk about that in the next session. Anyway, coming back to God's expectations from us. The first one was just a few restrictions. Don't do blasphemy. That's one expectation from God, right? The second one is build a good home here so you can build a good home there. And how do you build a good home here? By making sure you do things that benefit not just yourself but others. This is a fundamental concept in Islam. As a matter of fact, this really beautiful tradition in our history where, we believe that, there are sayings of the Prophet about the end of times and when there's going to be great war and catastrophe. The biblical, version of that is the Armageddon and all of that sort of thing, right? So major catastrophic events happening in the world. And the Prophet said when the Antichrist shows up, and we believe in the Antichrist too, when he shows up and one of you is busy planting a seed. Now, the companions of the Prophet are sitting there listening, the Antichrist has just shown up. The devil manifest. It's come out. Great war is coming. And you were just busy in your backyard doing what? Planting a seed. What should you do? Drop it and run? He goes, no, finish planting the seed. He said, finish planting the seed. Now what does he mean by that? He means don't be overwhelmed by world events. Things are looking pretty bad in the news, and they're going to look worse and worse and worse. And you're going to think, what is my insignificant good deed going to matter? Who's going to benefit from that? Don't underestimate the power of good. Just do it. And you may not even live to see that tree. You may not even live to see it. But the fact that one day that tree might grow, and somebody might sit in its shade. Somebody else might eat from its fruit. Somebody else might take from that fruit and take one of its seed and plant another tree somewhere else. You don't know how this will benefit others and therefore yourself in the afterlife. So don't underestimate it. Right? So we value all good things and we don't get overwhelmed by the negative forces around us.